8 months into my marriage, my life took an unexpected turn. My husband Sven insisted that I take care of his father, who had been seriously injured in an accident. Having never cared for someone in this capacity before, I found myself struggling with this sudden responsibility. As I tried to adjust, Sven informed me that he and his mother were heading to Hawaii for a vacation, leaving me behind to look after his father. They departed without realizing the weight of their decision. My name is M, and I'm 32 years old. I've always had a passion for cooking, which led me to a well-known restaurant chain after college. For the past 8 years, I have been working in the planning department, developing new dishes and products. I met Sven 2 years ago at a cozy Japanese pub I love to frequent. One evening, feeling adventurous, I went alone and sat at the counter. Sven happened to sit next to me, and we quickly discovered we were the same age. We struck up a conversation with the pub owner, sharing laughter and stories, and from that night on, Sven began asking me out regularly. His humor and zest for life drew me in, and our relationship blossomed naturally. After a year, we decided to marry. Now, 6 months into our marriage, we live in an apartment conveniently located between our jobs. With both of us having demanding careers, I sometimes struggle to keep up with housework, but Sven is always understanding. "You don't have to be perfect," he reassures me. "I'm just happy to be with you." I feel incredibly blessed to have such support, and even though I wish I could do more, I know our love and the time we share matter most. For the first 6 months, our life together was wonderful. We enjoyed meals, had meaningful conversations, and cherished our time together. I thought our happiness would last forever, but everything changed one evening when I returned home from work. I noticed something was off. Sven sat in the living room, staring at his phone with a troubled expression. Normally, we greeted each other with warmth, but the silence felt heavy. "Sven, are you okay? You look worried," I asked, my heart racing. He sighed. "My mom just called. My dad's been in an accident." Shock washed over me. "What happened? Is he okay?" I asked, feeling helpless as Sven explained that his father was injured and in the hospital, but his mother had asked them not to visit immediately. I could see the anguish etched on Sven's face. His father, an active 66-year-old who loved hiking and golfing, was not just his dad but also the president of Sven's company. This was a devastating blow. A week later, we finally visited my father-in-law in the hospital. He greeted us with a weak smile, and I immediately asked, "Are you okay?" He apologized for worrying us, but I reassured him that I was just relieved he was alive. Despite his smile, it was evident that the accident had taken a toll on him. He had injured his spine and was now paralyzed. The doctors told us he would need about 2 months of rehabilitation, followed by ongoing therapy. During this difficult time, Sven took over as president of the company while his father recovered. It felt surreal to see him in that role, even if it was only temporary. As I watched Sven interact with his father in the hospital room, I realized just how much everything had changed. I caught my mother-in-law giving me a stern look, and before I knew it, she pulled me aside, her tone sharp. "Em, are you sure you're not letting this go to your head?" I was taken aback. "Excuse me," I replied, bewildered. "Just because Sven is now president doesn't mean you can start taking advantage of him." "Don't forget your place," she said, her words cutting deep. I stood there, stunned by her accusation. The thought of taking advantage of the situation had never crossed my mind, but her remarks left me feeling hurt and frustrated. With my husband focused on his father's recovery and my mother-in-law's critical gaze looming over me, I suddenly felt very isolated. I had never had to worry about my finances. I had a good job and was well compensated, yet my mother-in-law always seemed to find something negative to say. From the start, she assumed I married Sven because he was the boss's son, even though I hadn't known that until well into our relationship. "You must have known Sven was the boss's son from the beginning." "How cunning of you," she smirked, her words sharp and untrue. Since our wedding, she had been sarcastic and unkind, always assuming the worst about my intentions. But I didn't marry Sven for his money. I fell in love with who he is. Frustration bubbled up, and I finally snapped. "I didn't marry Sven for his money. I love him for who he is." She sneered at me, her disdain palpable. "You think you know everything about me, but let me be clear. I will never approve of you." Just then, my father-in-law sensed the tension and asked what was wrong. My mother-in-law quickly replied, "Oh, nothing," glaring at me as if I were the source of the trouble. It was clear she adored Sven, and from her perspective, I was an unwelcome intrusion. I felt like an intruder in their family, just a woman who had snuck her way in. A few days later, Sven approached me with an unexpected announcement. "Em, you know Dad will be released from the hospital in a few weeks. Mom and I think it's time for us to move in with my parents." I was taken back. "Wait, what? Why are we suddenly moving in with your parents?" I asked, confusion flooding my voice. "Mom suggested it," Sven replied casually. She can't take care of Dad by herself. This is the best time for us to help. But what about our apartment? We worked so hard to find a place that's convenient for both of us. It's only 5 train stops away from your parents' house. Sven shrugged. You should be grateful. Not everyone has the luxury of a short commute. It was clear that he and his mother had already made their decision. No matter how much I tried to express my concerns, he brushed me off. As the moving date approached, Sven's attitude toward me grew colder. He became increasingly devoted to his mother, and any requests I made were met with irritation. How's the packing going? He asked one evening, his tone almost condescending. I won't be able to help on moving day, so you'll have to handle everything. You'll be in charge of all the household duties and Dad's care. Don't make Mom suffer. I felt overwhelmed by his demands. Work was busier than ever, and now I had to manage the move on top of everything else. I barely had time to rest, and mentally, I was reaching my limit. 2 months later, the move was complete, and my father-in-law was released from the hospital. My new role as his caregiver started immediately. I woke up at 4 a.m. every day to prepare breakfast, do laundry, and give my father-in-law massages before helping him change. I couldn't leave for work until I made sure everyone had eaten and my father-in-law was taken care of. Yet, despite all my efforts, my mother-in-law was never satisfied. Every morning as I rushed out the door for work, she found a reason to stop me. Can we talk about breakfast? It's not good enough. I'm sorry, I replied, feeling defeated. But I have to go to work now. Can we talk later? No, sit down now. Don't argue with me. Her constant complaints weighed heavily on me, and I began to experience headaches and heart palpitations every time she or Sven criticized me. I quickly realized that arguing wouldn't change anything, so I remained silent, pushing through each day at work. My colleagues started to notice my lateness, something that had never been an issue before. 3 months had passed since my father-in-law's release from the hospital, and I was still juggling caregiving, housework, and my full-time job. I barely had time to breathe. One evening after a long day, I rushed home and prepared a simple meal of boiled fish for dinner. When my husband saw the dish, he sneered. Fish? Really? After a long day, this is what you expect me to eat? I'm sorry, I replied quietly. I had to step away to help your father, so I didn't have much time. You should cook something that gives me energy, he said dismissively, pulling out a cup of instant noodles and pouring hot water over it. His indifference hurt, and I struggled to find the words to respond. As I cleaned up after dinner, my father-in-law noticed how pale I looked. Are you okay? You seem worn out. I forced a smile. I'm fine, just busy with work. But deep down, I was struggling. I tried to reassure him, but the truth was that I felt trapped. I wanted to escape the constant pressure from my husband and mother-in-law, but how could I walk away? If I left, what would happen to my father-in-law? He needed care, and I couldn't bring myself to abandon him, no matter how difficult things had become. I knew I had to keep going, at least for now, but each day it became harder to pretend that everything was fine. As the end of the year approached, I had a few days off from work, but that didn't mean I was free from my responsibilities at home. I spent those days cleaning the house and caring for my father-in-law. Then on New Year's Eve, my husband made a shocking announcement. We're heading to Hawaii, he said casually, referring to himself and his mother. Hawaii, I repeated, stunned. What about your father? He needs you here. He's fine with it. Sven brushed me off. Besides, you're off work, so you should stay and take care of things here. He and his mother exchanged smug glances as they showed off their large suitcases, clearly relishing my confusion. As they were about to leave, Sven turned to me with a grin. You'll be taking care of Dad while we're in Hawaii. We need a break. Have fun with that. They laughed and walked out, shutting the door behind them. In that moment, something snapped inside me. I couldn't believe they thought it was okay to leave me with all the responsibility while they went on vacation. It wasn't fair. I was done being treated like this. I made a decision then and there. I was going to divorce Sven when he came back. But until then, I would focus on caring for my father-in-law and leave all the other housework undone. The next morning I got up as usual, made breakfast for my father-in-law, and went to his room to help him. As I walked in with a towel and fresh clothes, he greeted me with a smile. Happy New Year, Em. Happy New Year, Dad, I replied, trying to keep my spirits up. He looked around and asked, Where are Sven and my wife? I thought I heard some kind of argument last night. They'd gone to Hawaii, I said flatly. Hawaii? His face darkened with disbelief. He sighed heavily, looking deeply disappointed. Let's just focus on the new year and make the best of things, I said, trying to lift his mood. But then he surprised me with what he said next. I'm sorry for everything, he said, his voice serious. There's something you should know. I paused, curious. What do you mean? I've been able to get out of bed on my own for a few days now, he revealed, smiling softly. "I've just been waiting for the right time to talk to you. I never thought they would leave like this, but now seems like the perfect moment." I was taken aback. "What are you saying, Dad?" He continued. "I know you've been the only one pulling the weight around here. I tried to get your mother-in-law and Sven to help out, but they completely ignored me. On top of that, I've been hearing troubling things from the company's executive director. He told me that Sven, acting as president, has been slacking off and doing whatever he pleases." My eyes widened as the pieces began to fall into place. Sven had been careless, not just at home but also at work. My father-in-law nodded. "I called one of the company's representatives and asked them to keep an eye on Sven. It turns out he's been neglecting his duties and everyone at the company is furious." I made up my mind. I was going to return to the company as president after the new year, and Sven would be demoted back to being just an employee. In fact, I planned to fire him. I was speechless. "But that wasn't all," he added with a sly smile. "The house is in my name. While they're away, we'll change the locks and make sure they can't come back." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. After all the times Sven and my mother-in-law had pushed me around, I was finally seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. My father-in-law, who had been quietly observing everything unfold, was now taking control. Together, we would stand up to them, and I would finally be free from their oppressive behavior. By the time they returned from their lavish vacation, the life they expected would be gone. A week had passed since my husband and mother-in-law left for Hawaii. During that time, I visited the city office and picked up 2 sets of divorce papers. I was ready for what was coming. The day they returned, I heard the front door shake and the intercom ring repeatedly. They were back, trying to open the door. I answered through the monitor, keeping calm. "Welcome back. How was your trip?" "Open the door right now." "What's going on?" Sven demanded. "I can't do that," I replied firmly. "Your father told me not to." "What are you talking about?" he exclaimed, panic creeping into his voice. "Did you enjoy the trip?" I asked, unfazed. "How was it spending company funds for a personal vacation?" His face went pale. "How did you find out about that?" he stammered, and I couldn't help but chuckle at his expression. My father-in-law, who had been quietly listening, stepped in. "So you really embezzled company money for your little getaway, huh?" "Dad, how? You shouldn't be able to stand," Sven blurted out, shocked to see his father on his feet. "I've been able to stand for a few days now," my father-in-law said coolly, "thanks to Maja's help with my rehabilitation. The managing director has kept me informed of your reckless behavior at work." Sven was now in full panic mode. "No, no, no, you've got it all wrong. I didn't do anything." "Saget," my father-in-law interrupted sharply. "You've been fired. Pack your things and leave the company. You're done." Through the monitor, I watched as my husband's face crumbled. Tears filled his eyes as he looked at me. Please don't leave me." "You're not going to leave me, are you?" Something inside me snapped. "What are you talking about?" I shouted back. "Do you even realize how much you've hurt me? Ever since you decided to move us in with your parents without my input, you treated me like a servant. You and your mother took advantage of me, forcing me to care for your father with no help or appreciation. Do you have any idea how exhausting and unfair that's been?" "Calm down. I'm sorry, I'm really sorry," he pleaded. "Your apologies mean nothing," I said coldly. "When you left for Hawaii, I finally understood that it was pointless to stay with you. I'm done. I'll live on my own. I don't need someone like you." My words seemed to knock the wind out of him. He staggered back, dazed, while my mother-in-law rushed to support him, looking equally stunned. It was a sad, pathetic scene. A mother trying to console her defeated son, but I felt no pity. My father-in-law opened the door, holding the divorce papers in hand. He handed them to my husband and mother-in-law, who were too shocked to resist. "Sign these," he said firmly. They had no choice but to sign the papers right then and there. Once they did, I kicked them out and locked the door behind them. They pounded on the door, begging to be let back in, but my father-in-law and I ignored their pleas. Since that day, I haven't seen either of them. Word has it they're both unemployed now, struggling to find a place to live. Reduced to sleeping in a comic book cafe and taking odd jobs just to get by, it's a far cry from the comfortable life they were used to. But it's the consequence of their actions. After the divorce, my father-in-law sat me down and said, "I'm going to hire a housekeeper from now on, so you're free to go and live your life." I took him at his word and moved into an apartment near my job. Since then, I've been living a peaceful, fulfilling life. I can't thank my father-in-law enough for standing by me and giving me the chance to start over. For the first time in a long time, I feel free and happy.